Life Stories.
But I said tonight we're going back up to Scotland for a story from a friend, Michael Holloway. Michael, when he was young, there were problems in the family, which caused quite a lot of emotional problems for him and caused him to turn to drugs. But then things happened in his life and he had a complete turnaround. And tonight, Michael is going to share his story with you. I'm going to hand over right now to you, Michael. Thank you.
Hello, can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. No, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for the invitation and appreciate the opportunity just to share my story and what's taking place in my life and the thing that has changed my life. So just no further ado, my name's Michael Holloway. I'm 45. I know I don't look 45. I look a lot younger, but we'll know. So at the moment, I'm married to a beautiful wife. She came from Canada. She emigrated for 10 years now. She emigrated to Scotland, and we've got 3 beautiful kids, Emma, Luke and Levi. But my life's hasn't always been this good. So probably going back into a bit of my history, a bit of my story. When I was my mum and dad, I was brought up in a housing scheme called On Thank. It's in Kilmarnock, which probably some of you will be familiar. They've done a 4-part documentary on that housing scheme a few years ago, which was pretty much, a lot of people say, that they were exploiting the poverty that was taking place in that housing scheme. But they actually termed the documentary called Scheme, and it was a lot of the people and the place where I had grew up on. So a lot of people were pretty much in the same boat, trying to make ends meet, trying to make a living, trying to get by, trying to just make life work. But the housing scheme had its problems, like most housing schemes in Scotland through the 80s and 90s. Drugs was starting to pull out and work their way into the housing schemes and into people's lives. So when I was probably growing up, my dad was an ex-forceman. He was in the army. And when he come back, I don't tell many people this, but I was actually born in Germany in the British military hospital because my father was in the forces. And so my mother had went and moved to live there with him. So me and my older brother were kind of born whilst my dad was in the army. And then eventually my dad came back into what they call Civvy Street. But when he came back into Civvy Street, there was a lot of trauma that he had sort of kind of picked up during his time when he was in the army. He was obviously, you got a lot of stuff, some of the places where he was stationed, there was a lot of stuff going on that he was subject to. So my dad, when he came out of the army, struggled to adjust back into civilization. So when he was in the army, he came out of the army with a drinking problem. Though there's a big, you probably know, in the army there's a big drinking culture, and my dad pretty much was consumed by that. And so when he came back in, he brought that into our home, that drink problem. He couldn't manage it, couldn't control it. It took control of him. And by the time I was 10, my dad was just constantly out of the pub, spending his money in alcohol, coming back, falling back in the house, absolutely intoxicated with alcohol, and then everything else that came with that, to the point that kind of caused a breakdown between my mum and my dad. And so my mum couldn't tolerate his behaviour and everything else that came along with that. And so eventually from that, my mother, in a sense, put him out, and there was a lot of turmoil and stuff like that took place in the home. So obviously as a young boy witnessing that, it was quite traumatic to be subject to that. And I remember one time, my mother had been in her friend's house, just spending time with her, and my dad had been, at this point, had moved out. but was living a few streets away in the same housing scheme. And I remember this time, it was me and a friend were in the family home sitting room. And then my dad came in and he says to me, he says, look, get your clothes on, you're coming with me. And I was like, what do you mean I'm coming with you? I says, can you give me a minute to go to the toilet? And so I run up, it was an upstairs, downstairs house. I ran up the stairs because the toilet, the bathroom was upstairs. I locked the bathroom door and I jumped out the bathroom window and run round to get my mother, panicking and saying, mother, my dad is trying to come in and try to take me. And so, but this thing that happened when my mother came back home, the first thing she done, she went into the kitchen, into the knife drawer and pulled out a knife in case my father was in the house. And I remember her searching through the cupboards with me behind her and thinking, this is madness. And these things were having an impression on me to the point where eventually, when the breakdown that was starting to then carry into my school and education and stuff like that, and I couldn't concentrate at school. I just couldn't focus at school, and just didn't want to be at school because I couldn't focus. And then that brought a whole collection of a whole host of problems as well. And just I remember from that, I remember the social work started getting involved in our sort of family life. And I remember we used to get this woman who was allocated to chaperone me to school, to primary school. And so she used to take me round to school and stand in the playground. And what I used to do is I used to walk in with the queue, the lineup, the school lineup. So I would be intentional and standing at the very back of the lineup. And then I'd be one eye on her and one eye on the lineup. And as the lineup was going in, I would take a side step behind the door and I'd watch till she was gone, and then I would run back home. So just
LifeStories.
there was just, I was unmanageable. And to the point where, when I was living, I ended up, one of the things I just want to emphasise is, before I was a drug addict, I was a thief. And I remember as a young kid, I realised that I could make money by taking people's property without their permission. And I started doing a lot of break-ins and stuff like that. I was a one-man crime spree in my community. And eventually that got so bad that it brought a lot of trouble to my mother's door. Anything that was ever happened in the community, anything that was ever stolen, my door get chapped. No, I had people turning up at my mother's door. I was like 15 at the time, and grown men coming to my mother's door with weapons to assault me because they believed that I had broke into their van, stole their stuff. And I got to the point I thought, I can't. The reputation I have created here is just, and the trouble that had been created because of the lifestyle and the thieving and stuff. Yeah, don't get me wrong, I was, at that point in time, I was dabbling with cannabis, smoking cannabis with some of the peers that I was kind of running around with in the housing scheme. But I got to a point, it got so bad that just people, because of the things I had done and the people I had wronged and the enemies I had created, I decided to move away. I was 16 at this point, and I moved from there. Is everybody else still okay listening to us? I'm not waffling on about here. Good. So I got to the point at probably about 16, 17, I moved to Ayr and trying to get a new start. And one of my friends from Kilmarnock, after a few months, he moved down alongside me, and the two of us kind of got like a little flat in Ayr together. And we were living there, and we were just taking drugs and stuff like that in the flat and stuff like that. But one of the things, his mother was a practicing Christian. So at a young age, I had been introduced, I had known his mother, I had known him and his family very well. And so there was that, she would tell us at times, and the opportunity she would share. But we got to the point, probably about 17, living in Ayr, and we were taking these things, this drug called temazepam. They've actually removed them off the market now, but we used to drink a lot and take these, used to call them jellies. They were like gel fix temazepam. Well, they took them off the market because they were bad, really bad for people. And so me and him, and I remember this time, during that time living in this little cottage that we had, we met these two friends and we started they became our girlfriends. And so in that time, we got so intoxicated one time that my friend had smashed up the cottage. And we were just, pretty much, he left me homeless. But at that point, I moved in with my girlfriend's mum and dad. They took me in. And probably at that point in my life, there's probably about 3 years of stability. At that point, they really loved me, took me in, embraced me as pretty much their own son at that point. But then, probably about 20, 21, that relationship broke down. And then the whole insecurity and everything started to come back. And I remember probably I met into these two brothers living in Ayr, and kind of really started sort of kind of running with these two brothers, and basically just things started getting bad again, and then I started going with this girl. She lived in a flat in George Street in Ayr. But this flat she lived in was right in the lion's den. It was right in the heart of all the addiction and everything that was going on in the town. This flat was like right in the centre of everything that was happening concerning the drug culture. And so from that, we ended up getting sort of involved with that. And so started taking drugs, and the drugs was getting worse and worse, and we started selling everything in the house and wasting all our money on that. But it got to the point, probably when I was about 25, me and this this partner that I had at that time, So we were living in this flat in Ayr, in George Street, Ayr, and whilst living in that flat, we were living on floorboards because everything had been sold. And basically it was a really rough time. But really at that point, the drug addiction had escalated. But at the same time, I kind of really got probably about 25, and probably within a space of a couple of months, there was probably 4 young men who came around my flat that all died with overdoses. So within the space of a month, I watched all these young men dying. There was like 4 of them, and they were only one was as young as 18 and the others were in their 20s. So I was watching these young men dying and just kind of thinking, really kind of premeditating that there was a point coming when my life would be next. But what happened is, during that time at 25, a little Christian cafe opened up downstairs from where I was living, which was just amazing, absolutely exceptional. And the lady who opened that cafe, she was the mother of one of these 2 brothers that I told you that I was sort of running around with. Well, one of these brothers had married a girl, and the girl's mother was the one who had the vision to open this outreach cafe to reach addicts, and it was right downstairs from where I was living. And so I used to open because we were in the flat above, and our closed door kind of opened up, and then to the right-hand side, there was this cafe where these Christians from a church called New Life in Prestwick were trying to reach people and share the love of Jesus Christ with them. And so I used to open my door, and these Christians every day were standing outside my closed door telling people about Jesus. And I'm like, come on, what is this all about? And the lady, my friend I told you, who moved to Ayr with me, his mother worked in the cafe. My other friend, his ex-wife's mother worked in the cafe. I'm like, I know these people, known them for years. And I says, here they've opened this cafe downstairs from where I'm living. And I kept saying to myself, how can I avoid these people? Because I cannot get away from them. Every time I open my door, they're there telling people, and they're reaching people. I thought, what is going on here? So I used to go in and talk to them, and because I knew them personally, knew their family, and as I've just explained to you. And they used to tell me, they said, Michael, your life doesn't need to be like this. Michael, your life doesn't need to be like this. But I used to say in my heart, what do you know about me? What do you know about my circumstances? What do you know about what's going on in my life? And just gradually they invited me along to the church. So I never came from a Christian background. My mother was pretty much very hedonistic. Well, more sort of kind of fatalistic. No, you make it work. No, what's for you won't go by you. No, you've got to make it work. It's all about you doing it for you. And that was more her sort of kind of mantra. And so Christianity wasn't something that was, I know even now I look back generations in my family and I can't find any Christians. So there was no real influence there, except this Christian cafe opening up and these sort of family members or friends being connected through that. So they invited me along to church. And I went along. They had organised a little minibus for anybody interested from this cafe that was going to go along. And so I, sort of a curiosity, went along. But it was, I don't know, it's a Pentecostal church, the sort of kind of live band, and people are lifting their hands and quite exuberant and very expressive in their sort of kind of style of meeting together. And I went in there and I just thought, wow, this is like a foreign world to me. Well, this is like stepping into a world I've never encountered. But one thing I noticed, there was I seen this basket of money getting passed from person to person along these aisles. And so my ex-partner was with me, and I says, do you see that? I says, when it comes to us, you create a distraction and I'll get some of the money. So the collections come round and she's created a distraction and I've took £20 out of the collection. I thought nobody had seen me. I thought I'd get away with it. I thought I was smart and got away with it. But after that, I couldn't sleep. I was tossing and turning in my bed. I was having nightmares. I was waking up absolutely sweating, riddled with guilt. And the first thing that was coming to me, you shouldn't have took that money, you shouldn't have took that money, you shouldn't have. And I thought, what is wrong with me? I've never felt as bad as this. And all the wrong I've done, I've never felt as bad as this. And I was tossing for weeks. I was fighting with this guilt and conviction. And I remember I went back to the church, sadly, with the intention of getting more money. Even though I was absolutely riddled with guilt, I was going back to the church with the intention of getting more money. And this time I went back, and I see Jim Wallstrom's on. He can verify probably everything I'm saying. He was probably in the church at that time. But I remember going back. This was 20 years ago. This would have been 2001. Oh, sorry, 2001, sorry. 2001, sorry. This story I'm telling you took place. And I remember going back to the church and I tried to take the money again. And there was a retired pastor by the name of Alwyn Pearson. Some of you might know him. He's been on the road for quite a number of years. But he's seen me take the money. And so I had seen that he had seen me. So I tried to make an exit for the door. And before I knew it, he was right in front of me. And he grabbed me by the scruff of the neck. And this man was about 70 at the time and about 7 stone. And when he had a hold of me, I could not move. And he says, give us the money back. And I says, I've not got any money. He says, look, it's in your pocket. And I says, right here, take your money. And I stormed out the church doors. I stormed down the drive. I stormed up the street. I got to the end of the street. And when I got to the end of the street, this voice spoke to me. I've never had schizophrenia in my life. But this voice spoke to me and says, all they have done is shown you love. And all you've done is throw it back at them. And the next thing I knew, I was standing in the middle of the street with the tears running down my cheeks, weeping, emotional, and thinking, what has become of my life? How did my life get to this? How did my life become this? Where does it go from here? And I thought, go back. I thought, but you don't go back when you've committed a crime. You don't go back. And I'm wrestling in my head and it's saying, go back. And I walked back the quarter of a mile it would have been, back up to the church. And the same pastor, the retired pastor that had grabbed me, invited me into the church, and him and another man took me into a small room. I don't remember what they prayed. I don't remember what they said. All I remember was I was weeping for about 30 minutes in there. And from that day, I can...
Life Stories. Life Stories.